Hi, everyone. I'm Scott Brandley.
And I'm Alicia Coakley. Every member of the church has a story to share, one that can instill faith, invite growth, and inspire others.
On today's episode, we're going to hear how one woman's struggle to find her place in the church has taught her how to use the gift of discernment to separate culture from the gospel. Welcome to Latter-day Lights. Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us today on another episode of Latter-day Lights. We're excited to introduce to you today our guest, Erica Steed. Erica, thank you so much for hopping on this podcast with us.
I am so glad y'all let me be here. Thanks for letting me crack the party for an episode.
Of course, no problem. Thank you for reaching out. So we actually, to our listeners, I put a post up on I don't even know which group it was on, one of our groups that we're on. And I was just like, something on Facebook. And I'm like, hey guys, I'm looking for more stories. So if anyone wants to be on a show, let me know. And Erica reached out and we got connected and here she is. It's super easy, right?
I thought it would be more difficult, but here we are. Wonders of technology.
I know it's awesome. So thank you so much. We love. Scott and I love any of our guests that we have come on, but it's always fun to be able to get guests that neither one of us know. It's always nice to be able to build new relationships and hear new stories and stuff. So thank you for that.
Of course.
So Erica, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Okay, so I joined the church officially November of 2020. So I came in at a very awkward time for not only the church, but everybody.
The whole world.
Yes. Let me see. I'm 30. I am single. No kids biologically yet, but every student I've ever had knows that I am mom.
Okay.
I am a musician. I've had multiple music callings in the church so far. I am a crafter, mainly knitting. It's on me all the time.
Oh, nice. Are you going to knit during our show?
I am a nerd like that, man.
Oh my goodness, so fun.
Yeah, like I said, major nerd, sort of fantasy, sci-fi type of girl. I've got a cat. I'm an only child. My family is sort of a bit all over the place, all over the country. So, nice. But here in my town, it's just me and my parents and one or two other family members, and that's really it. So,
wow. And where's your town?
I am in Nacogdoches, Texas. That is Longview, Texas Steak. I'm sort of in the middle of the Dallas, Shreveport, Houston triangle.
Oh, okay.
So nice. Sort of eastern Texas, sort of almost to Louisiana.
Okay. So you're going to be knitting a cowboy hat then, is that right?
Maybe a cheese head because the Packers are really the only way to go.
Okay.
All right. Well, we're excited to hear some more about your story. So why don't you take it away?
So like I said, am a convert to the church. I actually had a Spanish teacher in high school who is now currently on my state presidency, who he's been a member his whole life. So I sort of vaguely knew of the church, but it was not long before the pandemic started, actually. I had met a set of missionaries after a very interesting religious journey. I grew up in a First Church of the Nazarene, which taught me a lot of what not to do in a religion. I went atheist from about the age of 15 to about the age of 24, 25. I then decided I was going to be Catholic. So an entire other swing in the pendulum direction. Yep. And it was while I was heavily practicing Catholic that I met a pair of sister missionaries randomly at my public library. And my first thought was, oh God, the Utahs. Oh. My second thought was, it is Texas in the middle of July. Get these poor name tag babies out of the heat.
Oh.
Get them in the library. And They started asking me like all these questions. I had plenty for them back. Like, okay, what do y'all really think of Warren Jeffs? What's with the skirts? Like, what's with a lot of things? Like, so why do y'all use the Book of Mormon instead of the Bible again?
Right.
And I was that person. I found out much later that the junior companion of that set had flown in from Provo on Monday out of the MTC, and I met her on Tuesday.
Oh,
Wow.
poor girl.
Like, yeah, I know. She was stuck with
She was
Smile
just
on her
thrown in
face.
there, huh?
And through a lot of stuff with missionaries over about a year and a half period. It took me a while to sort of get comfortable with the gospel before I ever even was baptized. I just had a lot of sort of religious baggage mixed with wrong information. Um,
Mhm.
Three of my favorite things I was told by pairs of missionaries were number three, single people don't get into heaven, right?
Oh my gosh.
Which was then corrected to, oh, you get into heaven, you just don't get into the celestial kingdom as a single.
Oh, jeez.
So, which had to be completely corrected by members.
Mhm.
Number two was a pair of elders I'd asked, okay, why are women good enough for the priesthood? And they're like, oh, you know how women are blessed with the physical ability to give birth, right? I'm like, well, yeah, obviously. Well, because of that, we men deserve everything else.
Oh my gosh.
And one of my absolute favorites was a pair of sisters the first time they introduced the concept of the temple. I
Mhm.
was used to things like cathedrals and basilicas from the Catholic faith where you do different things, but you can still have a Sunday mass.
Right.
And I'm just asking, like, okay, what is this temple? Like, do y'all do Sunday service in it? Like, how is this different? Like, when do you go? Where's the closest one? And one of these sisters just looks at me with almost pity on her face and is like, oh, Erica, you're not good enough for the temple.
Oh,
Oh,
no.
wow. Okay.
Oh,
So just lots of misinformation before I even got in. So it's like,
wow.
so even when I was baptized, I sort of entered feeling like a third class citizen.
Mm.
Not necessarily the doctrine, but okay, I don't go to heaven unless I get married. So if I die in a car wreck today, I have no hope.
Oh,
And I'm a single, childless female convert who never went on a mission. And the things just kept stacking up.
mm.
And I have had members of my ward be like, one time I had somebody ask, how do you not know who Harold B. Lee is? I'm sorry, treat me like I'm a baby Mormon.
Yeah, you didn't grow up
Treat
in the
me like
church.
I don't know what I'm doing.
Right.
And they're like, well, how are you a member of the church and you don't know Harold B. Lee?
Mm.
Like, and just so many things where I'd get 8 different stories from 11 different people. Coming up on my endowment, nobody could seem to get their story straight on what's pandemic, what's not. What am I allowed to do with a limited temple recommend? Can I see my friend get endowed or not? Like, what can I do and not do? And the confusion mixed with the weird cultural things, I did not know what I was doing. And
Oh,
I
wow.
did
Mhm.
not really have people that understood. I feel like they meant well. I feel like they
Mhm.
wanted to, but either they'd been members their whole life back to great great granddaddy Brigham Young, or they had been converts so long that they forgot what it was like. They didn't,
Yeah.
they didn't remember. And it's like
Right.
they're so busy hearing me that they don't hear me.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So
So
it was hard. It's still hard.
Mhm.
so how did you overcome some of those that misinformation and still move forward towards that baptism and towards being a member? What kept you going even though you had some of those things happen?
I mean, once I finally clicked in a relationship with Heavenly Father, it made it easier, not
Okay.
easier, but
Mhm.
having that sense of revelation and doctrine mixed together to be able to fight the culture. It's like, that is not what I'm being told. Dad did not say that. No, thank you. So
Yeah.
not having that definitely helped, and finding ways also to narrow my circle. Not necessarily trusting everybody. Like
Mhm.
knowing who is giving me accurate information, like knowing the valid websites to find things on, like having those resources to be able to shift and narrow my focus as well. So
Mhm.
Okay.
that helped.
Right.
Okay. So you were able to overcome some of those early objections, and you
Right,
still got that revelation, and you knew it was still the right thing to do.
right.
And so you got baptized, and okay.
So did you have any type of support like right away joining the church who were giving you, right information, and or was that something that came later on?
I mean, I had a few at first. I had that one Spanish teacher of mine who was in my ward who happened to be the one to baptize me.
Oh, cool.
I had
Okay.
him and his wife. I've had a few other people in the very beginning, very small circle, until I
Mhm.
sort of start gauging people and, sort of tell me, okay, now she does this, but he does that. No, that's not what that means at all. Tone it back, come here.
Yeah,
So having those sort of 5 or 6 people up front to be able to buffer some things off of really helped.
Okay.
nice. Okay, very cool. So
Well,
once you get
sometimes
baptized,
oh,
oh, sorry. Go ahead, Scott.
I was gonna say sometimes it just takes that one or two special people in your life that 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 make all the difference, right?
Right.
So that's awesome.
So you mentioned before that, one of the things that was really hard for you in joining the church was that you're 30, you're single, you don't have any biological children. Um, did you find that there are other women in the church who are actually quite like you, who are in kind of that similar spot? Were you able to make friends with them? How does that work for you now? Because you've been a member for a couple years now, right? Like we're coming up on your 2-year anniversary, correct?
Right. I mean,
So yeah,
there
how did that help?
I mean, in my area, I mean, we're a smaller area. My town is about 30,000 people, and we only have a few, I don't know, 2 or 300 active members in my
Oh
ward.
wow.
So, there's like a lot of the singles in my ward are, 50s, 60s, 70s, divorced,
Mm,
widowed, kids my age. Like there are one or two who just never got married, but they're in their 60s.
mhm.
So find like a lot of the ones that aren't married are either 30 years older than me or 15 years younger. So I'm
Uh,
still trying to sort of find my place of, okay, I don't have kids like y'all do. Okay, I don't have these experiences under my belt like y'all do. Like my 30 plus SA group is pretty much all 20 something, 30 something years older than me. So
mhm.
I'm still trying to sort of find that comfort zone.
Gotcha. So have you done anything to look out online? Because I know, especially we were saying like with technology, right? Like it opens so many doors of possibilities. Has that been something that you've looked into at all? Is trying to find people more in your situation from maybe like Facebook or something like that?
I've used it some, but it's been difficult to figure out like what is authentic, what is,
Mm,
not the trolls trying to get in and like poke holes in the doctor. It's like
Yeah.
yeah.
finding people and like, I'm 2 hours and change from Houston, 3 hours and change from Dallas, an hour and something from Shreveport. So a lot of these big areas with a bunch of singles, it's a bit of a drive.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Gosh, that can be so tough. Well, so what have you done to kind of make yourself fit then in your small area, your smaller ward? What are some of the things that you've figured out that are good truths to concentrate on?
So having the music callings have been really interesting. Like I ended up having a music minor coming out of college. So being
Okay.
able to put some of that to use and be able
Mhm.
to sort of speak to people that way. Like a lot of people have started conversations over, oh my goodness, that hymn was gorgeous. Like, that's one of
Aw.
my favorites. That reminds me of what, and it'll sort of start these natural conversations with some people that I might not have reached out with. And then interestingly, sort of family history stuff and temple stuff is sort of tried to like talking to people about that and like talking with their struggles with that is like trying to find those connections to where it's like, yeah, you might be married with 6 kids or you might be, 57 and divorced, but like we all have the temple stuff. We all have like trying to find those little blips of sameness have
Nice.
really sort of helped.
So did you have an interest in any type of family history before you joined the church, or was that something that the church kind of brought out in you?
I mean, the church really brought it out. It's like, I was one of those people. It's like I have my parents, I have my grandparents, maybe some great aunts and uncles, like, but it's like I had my immediate genetic sphere, but the sort of family history idea was something new upon joining the church. That is like,
Mhm.
I sort of like almost felt like Macaulay was it Macaulay Culkin or Haley Joel Osment in the Sixth Sense. It's like we do what to dead people?
Oh.
Hang on, like we do what to dead people? Like hang on. So it took a bit to sort of like what exactly temple work is, and it's like how are you supposed to describe temple work for the dead when you can't even talk about temple work for the living. Because I haven't
Yeah.
been in my endowment yet. I can't tell you. So how am I supposed to understand temple work if we ain't allowed to talk about it? Okay. That's fine. Okay, Brenda.
Oh,
But
wow.
so
Now,
like
have you gone through the temple? Have you gotten to that point where you've been able to do some baptisms and stuff? Or have
yeah,
you gone through and got your endowments? Are you there yet?
yeah, I got my endowment this past December.
Aw,
Oh, awesome.
nice.
It was a rough experience because
Yeah. They're not always super spiritual at first. Sometimes it's just overwhelming and you're just like, "What the heck?"
yeah,
Huh.
I ended up like having a panic attack in the celestial room at mine because I was so
Aw.
overwhelmed. And there was a lady who went with me who like she's like, Erica, I know why you're having a hard time. I'm like, please tell me why. Like I don't understand. And she's like, honey, it's because you brought Satan into the temple with you.
Oh my gosh. Are you kidding me? What is with members in Texas, y'all? Come on.
And people wonder why I struggle, but okay.
Wow.
So I'm like, first of all, I did not think I was that powerful, but thank you anyway.
Oh,
Like,
gee.
second of all, I thought he wasn't allowed on temple grounds.
Oh.
Like, what did I miss? So like, I did not want to go back for the longest time,
Yeah.
but I did, and I ended up like finding, a bunch more peace in it, but also so much overwhelm. Because as
Yeah.
a single woman, no sons, no brothers, like my dad's not a member, like, I'm sitting here with like all these man reservations. And I was like, how am I supposed to do any of this? Like,
Mhm.
how is this supposed to work?
Right.
Like, I'm already behind on the
Oh.
stuff I think, like the female initiatories and endowments, marriage sealings, like bringing in both genders of baptisms. Like, I'm already behind. How am I supposed to get any of this man work done? I'm sitting here on my little single island. Like, how's this supposed to get done? And people are like, oh,
Yeah.
leave some to the temple. Like, that's what I did. I just had to give up. I'm like, what you mean give up? Like, those are your humans, man. Like, those
Oh.
are your people.
Mhm.
They're the reason you're here. What you mean give up?
Right.
You know?
Yeah. I remember, so I don't know how, if you've listened to any of the other episodes or anything like that from our show before. But I remember, even though I wasn't single and I had children, my husband wasn't a member, for a very long time, for the first 13 years of our marriage. And I grew up in a family that was very, very inactive. And so my parents, it took them 40 years to get to the temple, right? And
Mhm.
so I remember sitting in the celestial room sometimes, or going through and doing work. And even though, I wasn't in the same boat as you, I can empathize with how it must have felt too. Cause I do remember looking around and I would see all these couples, or I would see these families who were there with their missionary that was going to go off on a mission, or, you know what I mean? Like it seems like there was so much love and familial support. And then here I was, and I was all by myself. And it was like, I'm here and I feel peace and I know I'm where I'm supposed to be, but it's so heartbreaking at the same time. It was like this constant reminder of what I didn't have, you
Right.
know? And
Yeah.
it was so painful, but I do remember, um, one of the things that kind of helped me to shift was to think about, like, I don't know anybody else's story in the temple either. I
Right.
don't know if that couple
Mhm.
sitting there just made it to the temple for the first time. You know what I mean? I don't know if that woman that's over there, if she has been a widow for 50 years and, you know, even though she looks happy and she has all of her friends around her, maybe internally, like, she is struggling too. And I just I kind of thought, if I can just have my Heavenly Father help me to see all these other people in his eyes, maybe it would help me to, like, take all of the focus off of, like, what I'm still waiting for, and that ended up helping out a lot, to the point where, I started craving the temple, like, I would get to the point where, like, I was like, "Oh, I need this in my life. I need to go. I need to be there." And then I started being more, open, and I would, like, sit with someone who is by themselves, or you know what I mean? Like, I tried to, like, get out of my comfort zone. And instead of waiting for someone else to come over to me, I was like, "You know what? I gotta go sit down and go over to them." So, that seemed to help me a lot. Was there anything that sort of helped you to keep going? Was it just that drive to get the work done?
I mean, it was partly that. I've got a couple of people in my stake who one of them is a ordinance worker in the Houston Temple. And I've got another friend who lives about an hour from me who he is a shift coordinator in the Dallas Temple.
Mm,
So like having them to be able to bounce off of, like having, developing these relationships with ordinance workers from going. It's like we don't know each other's names. Like we just know you're like
right.
know each other's faces. Like you, yeah, like and like not only having that, but like I started talking to other people around me, like in my ward and in my state, like how do y'all people get this done? Like, y'all have been in the church for a minute. Like, how do y'all do this? Like, how does this play out for you? And I started meeting people in very similar boats. It's like, you know, most of my family's inactive and I've been divorced 15 years and my spouse was never a member. I can't.
Yeah.
Like, I've been single for a while. I can't. I've been only in the church 4 or 5 years. Like, I can't get any woman names done as a single man. Like, I started finding more and more people that were sort of in my position. And I'm like, you know, it made me start thinking, like, I started once or twice took names for a couple of the guys in my church, like, "Give me your woman." Like, "Give me something." It's like, I'm doing that, like, "Give me your woman." Like, start handing them over, and it made me start thinking, it's like, we need to be doing something, and I had an experience fairly recently, about a little almost a month ago now, that I had this like stack of baptisms. Like I was maxed out at 300 reservations.
Oh,
I had
man.
like 110 baptisms that needed doing. Like
Oh, man.
70 of them were men. And I'm just like, I don't know. I don't know. And a few weekends ago, I'd gone to the Houston temple and I just brought like a stack of stuff with it. Like, what gets done, gets done. It's gonna happen. I'll keep the Ziploc bag. And I
Wow.
walked in a couple days before. A family that I know from my ward took about 15 of my baptisms. Like, okay, great. That's about that much. And I go into the Houston Temple, like into the baptistry, and I'm like, okay, look, help. Like, I
Mhm.
don't know how to do this, but help. And I happened to come across a group from a couple of wards near Houston. And like one of the male leaders comes up to me and he's like, you got names. I'm like, yeah, yeah. And he says to all his kids, he's like, okay, all like 30 of y'all start taking names.
Wow.
Like, we're allowed five. If you didn't bring any, go get five. If you only have two, grab three of hers because you're allowed five. Go
Wow.
start doing. That was
Nice.
about another 65 off my plate. I had a random person online that I still have not met in person. She sent her husband and kids to the temple at the same time, and she said, "Get what's left over." I handed her about
Aw.
the other 45. They were done within 72 hours.
Oh,
Wow.
man.
So within about a 96, like 4 or 5 day period, over 100 baptisms gone
Awesome.
Wow.
from strangers.
That
I
is phenomenal.
I had a couple from the next town over be like, you know what? Give me your marriage sealings. Give them here. Like, and give me all 96 man initiatories you have. Give them.
Wow.
So I started thinking, it's like, if that's, you know, random strangers one time and one or two families from my area for me, what can we do for the rest of us?
Right?
The divorced ones who never had a chance. The ones like me who it's like, I've got 100 and something man reservations that I'm never going to get done. And
Mhm.
started drafting a proposal and I started getting the messages with my state president. And I'm like, look, we need to do this. We need trips for the men so they can take man names for the women like me. We need woman trips that bring woman names for the men like me. We need teenage
Mhm.
trips where every like people can print off their baptisms, give them to the kids. You know, it's like
Right.
Mhm.
here for 6 hours, what gets done gets done. Because
Wow.
we can't sit here and say we love our neighbor if we pretend our neighbor doesn't have any needs.
Right.
Like we're like in my area, Houston Temple's about 2.5, 3 hours away, and that's the closest. Dallas
Mhm.
is about 3.5. Lubbock's 9. San Antonio's 5 to 6. Baton Rouge is
Right.
5 to 6. And that's our closest five.
Mhm.
Like we're sitting here saying we want oh, like they didn't announce us a temple in East Texas again. Are we doing anything about it? Are we doing any work? Because
Mhm.
just doing the work for people like me, like, you know, we're gonna get a temple, and so much more is gonna get done. We just have to actually like show Salt Lake we're serious.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
can't
You
just
know,
sit and see it anymore. We actually have to like do something.
right.
Yeah.
It's funny because I'm so like I'm just like, oh my gosh, it's so similar. I'm in this tiny little town called Elko. We have about I think 25,000 people, and we're getting a temple. And like you, we have one in Twin Falls that's 2.5 hours away. We have one in Utah. Well, it would have been a Salt Lake would have been our temple, but because of the renovations and all that stuff, like it's not anymore. And so like we have those far distances, and we actually had President Hinckley come. I believe it was President Hinckley. I want to say it was around the year 2000 ish. And he had promised that if we brought the names, if we did our family history, that there would be a temple in Elko. And I remember last year when it was announced, it like there is no greater feeling than hearing that your area is going to get a temple, especially when you've been so far away from them. so far away. You know, I was spoiled rotten when I lived in Ogden. I had a temple that was like 7 minutes down the road from me. But originally I grew up in Florida. And so my closest temple was Orlando, and that was 3.5 hours away. So I empathize. It is so hard. It is so hard. But you know, being here in Elko the last few years and just seeing like we've had these like challenges amongst our wards and stuff. We actually did this one. It was great. It was so fun. We did a generational challenge. So we had like the millennials versus the boomers versus Gen X, you know, or whatever generation it is. And we tried to see who could do the most indexing, right? And it was so fun. I mean, there was no prize, there was no anything other than bragging rights, right? We
Right.
did win, but no, but it was so fun. And we ended up indexing in 1 month more names than had been indexed in the entire year prior. Isn't that
Mhm.
crazy? Like, so,
Right.
and that was just our ward, right? And so there's special promises like that our Heavenly Father makes to us. And you're right. When we show up and we do the work, when we do our family history and we bring those names to the temple and we help others to bring their names to the temple, all of that will show Heavenly Father, like, hey, we need a temple of our own. We're going to keep it busy enough. We're going to keep it going. So that's so cool though, that you know, that you're kind of like starting this initiative to get more temple work to be done. And I love the idea of like separating it into groups, because I think there's something special about connecting with other people who have something in common with you, whether it's like a men's trip and a women's trip, and you know, maybe one for just families or one for just youth or whatever. Like I definitely think that there's power in that, and it's just it's so cool. It's so cool. So good
Yeah.
job.
When I was the bishop, I actually had some single sisters give me names. And I got the youth involved a couple times. I did some myself. So it just, yeah, you just got to be
Right.
innovative, right?
Yeah, and it's been the
Mhm.
struggle for me. Like I've asked people in my ward. Like I've had the one family do baptisms once. I think I've had one or two women take an endowment once,
Hmm.
and that's it. Like,
Mhm.
I would ask members that are, like, bringing their kids on a ward trip for baptisms, I'm like, "Can y'all's, like, kids take one of my names? Like, 1 name per kid, like, please?" And they're like, "Sorry, we have our own." "But
Yeah.
I
Right.
brought yours 3 weeks ago." "Okay, okay." Yeah, like,
Oh.
it's like, "Don't ask me again." Like, just because you know I'm going, it's like, and I don't want to be that way because the work needs doing. But
Yeah.
it's like, we need to help each other. Like, we say we love each other and we're following Jesus. Like, would Jesus turn my temple work away?
Well,
Like,
I'm going to tell you, Erica, if you want to send me any names, we will get names done. We're still pretty far. We're still 2.5 hours away, but we go enough to Idaho and Utah and stuff like that that I will bring names if you need to send any my way.
Yeah. You know what I
Mhm.
like about you, Erica, is even though you had a rough start, right?
Mhm.
You had the faith and and the, you know, the willpower. I don't know if that's the right word, but like to just stick in there and keep going forward. I
Mhm.
think if I were to name this podcast, I'd probably say like faith in progress or something like that, right? Because you're still
Nice.
very new to the church and still trying to figure things out, but you have that faith to keep going and keep progressing. And
right,
that's really cool. And I'm glad that we were able to do this podcast with you, because I think people need to know that none of us have it all together, right? We're
No.
still trying to figure it out. And
you
sometimes
don't.
you
Well, I mean, I do.
So-
I don't know about Scott. No.
right. I mean, Alicia does, but
I have nothing together.
sometimes it's good to hear that we don't have it all together yet, and we're still figuring it out, right? So that
Right,
takes courage to get on the podcast and not necessarily know that everything's figured out yet. That's still a good story, and it's still important to tell.
right.
Yeah.
Like, when people ask me, it's like, how do you have it this much together? It's like, honey, I have exactly 0 of the things together. Like,
Yeah.
none of them at all. But like I just like hope that like I am trying to be as intentional as possible, like doing prayer, reading my scriptures, like when God pokes you with something, like pay attention, like, and it might not make sense right now. I'm still getting pokes where it's like, Dad, what? Like I'm very like it's like I don't know, like, and there's still so much with me trying to get these temple trips with my steak. It's like, you know,
Mhm.
I don't even know what's happening. Like nothing, like no balls are even rolling yet.
Right.
Like I have no idea how this is gonna go. Like my thing could not even happen the way it's in my head that it's gonna happen.
Mhm.
But I'm hoping. I had a time recently, like where I got this impression, like this man is supposed to give you a blessing. So I text his wife and I'm like, look, can I borrow your husband, get a blessing? Like, you what if, and it takes like, a couple of weeks of trying to coordinate schedules. And she's like, look, he can't do it. I'm gonna get you hooked up with the elders quorum president. I'm like, okay, that's not the vibe I got, but okay.
Mhm.
And his blessing ended up being better than the one I would have had in the first place. So it's
Wow.
just little things like that to prove to me it's like, you know, I was still obedient. I still did the right thing. Like I followed the process,
Mhm.
and it ended up looking completely different. It's like, I was sitting there sort of in the middle of it. It's like, but you said call them. You said talk to them. And it's like, and you did. And that got you what you needed.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So,
That's
like,
so
having
so many times when I was a bishop, that happened to me so many times. I'm like, why did you prompt me to do that when that didn't work out? But something always happened that I didn't see coming, and I'm like, wow, okay. I guess you do know
right,
what you're doing.
right. It's like you're God or something. It's like you plan.
It's like you know everything.
It's like you're the deity of the universe or something.
Yeah.
Like, you know?
Yeah. Well,
That's
and I
funny.
can see how it can be so frustrating sometimes. I mean, it to me too, right? Like sometimes it's so frustrating when things don't happen in our time. But
Mhm.
Heavenly Father's just sitting back there, he's just drinking his hot chocolate, I'm sure, and he's just like, "It's okay. Chill out. I got this. Like, I'll get around to that when I'm good and ready, Like everything will be fine. You just keep doing what you're going to do. You keep showing up." This is one thing that Scott actually I remember he gave this talk in Sacrament years ago, and it was all about showing up. And it was like such
Mhm.
a like if you have that talk, you should totally send it to me because it was so good. And but the whole point of it was just like you just keep showing up. You keep doing and doing and doing until the job gets done, right? Like you just keep promising and proving to your heavenly Father, look, it might be a little messy. It's probably going to fall apart in some areas here and there. I'm not going to be perfect at it, and in my terms, I'm definitely going to be 15 minutes late, but I'm going to keep showing up. And I
Mhm.
love that you're doing that even though it was confusing and even though you had some really horribly wrong things said to you, and again, like you had mentioned, they probably weren't trying to intentionally hurt you or give you
Right.
misinformation, but I think that sometimes that's what we do as people. Like we're so afraid to tell people I don't know. We're so
Mhm.
afraid to not have the answer that we just make crap up in our head, and we're just like, "Oh,
Right.
this sounds good enough." Or we
Well,
get so
and
caught on our own ideas and our own theories that we don't even bother to go and check them against what the church is teaching, what the gospel really
Mhm.
is. And it's hard. I mean, distinguishing between culture and gospel doctrine is so hard sometimes.
Right.
So,
And
um,
Yeah.
that was one of my favorite things I first learned as an educator. It's just like there's something magic when you tell these little faces looking up at you. It's like, look, dude, I don't know. I don't know anything. Like, they put me up here because I'm supposed to be an adult, but I don't know anything. And they're just like, and there's something about like, I'll figure it out for you. And they're just like, oh, okay. Like,
Yeah.
and
yeah.
there's times in the church where like, when people ask me questions, I'm just like, bro, I don't know. Like,
Mhm.
let me figure out some stuff, and I'm gonna come back to you. And it's like, that has helped so much, like finding the people that care about getting it right, that
Yeah.
care
Yeah.
about like making sure that information is there, but just also knowing like the connection you have to your own discernment and own personal revelation and being able to pray and take it straight to God and be like, okay, I'm
Hmm.
having confusion. I don't know what's happening. Like, can you steer me to a way? Can you point me to something? And
Yeah.
being able to sort of have, hopefully, at the end of it, the trust and the faith to sit through the pins and needles and the stomach turning and the weirdness and the I thought you said this was going to work and
Right.
the complications to just at the end of the day like realize that you didn't like and I forget if I think it's the Rolling Stone, you can't always get what you want, but you find sometimes you get what you need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
Exactly.
Yep.
Wow.
And God does give us what we need. We just have to have the faith because we're on his timetable, right?
Hmm.
So, Alicia, I can't believe you remembered that talk. Man, that's good that somebody
It's
actually listened to me.
okay. It stood out, and I have shared bits and pieces of it a million and a half times. I mean, like, I don't even give you the credit, Scott. I just like make people think I came up with it.
Yeah, that's okay.
No, it was such a good time. It just stood out to me so much. So it's probably all for me. That's probably why nobody else remembers
That's
it. Is because
cool.
like it was like Heavenly Father was like Alicia.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a great talk.
like listen.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Um,
Erica, do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to share before we wrap things up?
um I would just say that for one thing, you're not as alone as you think you are. There is always going to be somebody in some sort of similar enough situation. And whether you find them at a chili cook off or in the temple or, because they randomly sat next to you at choir practice, it's like you're never quite as alone as you think you are.
mhm.
And if you just keep trusting and believing and reaching out to God and sometimes allowing yourself to throw a fit and be like, I don't like it. Like just having the hope and the perseverance to just keep trying that eventually you are going to get what you need. And God knows you very intimately and personally and you will always get exactly what he intends for you to have and exactly what you need.
Well, Erica, thank you so much for being on the show today, and we wish you all the best as you continue on that journey of faith. And you're just like you said, you're just a little baby in the faith, right? But you've already grown so much, and you're an inspiration to me, and I'm sure you'll be an inspiration to many people
Definitely.
that need to hear this message. So,
Thank
thanks again.
you. Of
Awesome.
course. Happy to be here.
Yeah, and feel free to let us know how things go. Maybe we'll do a check-in in about a year or so and see if you're able to get your stake to kind of implement these, men's only trips and women only trips and things like that. Definitely keep us updated and let us know how it goes. I think it's a great idea. I think we should
Yeah,
totally implement it like everywhere. I think it would be great.
definitely. We're gonna have to see progress, sort of coming back
Mhm.
from things off of COVID and like coming off of the weirdness in some places, but
Oh yeah.
hopefully, it's something that can be worked on and tweaked and the refining can just keep going on it and it'll end up how it's going to end up.
Yep,
Awesome. I love
definitely.
it.
Well,
Well,
great.
thank you again, Erica. Thank you to our listeners for tuning in this Sunday and for, hearing this story. Make sure that you guys, if you have a story like Erica's, if you have some personal experiences that have really helped you to grow and to develop your own testimony, reach out to us. You can head over to latterdaylights.com and you can submit a little form at the bottom of the page. If you know someone who might be a really great guest on the show, someone whose story you kind of know about, please, please, please be sure to let us know. We're all over social media. like I said, you can go to latterdaylights.com and you can submit this short little form. It's not painful. It's not scary, right, Erica?
No, it's not painful. They only take your bone marrow on the 3rd visit, so
Just a little bit.
it's okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and if you guys are on, YouTube, if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you subscribe so you can get alerts next time that we do a podcast, which is usually every Sunday morning. And same thing with like Apple. If you're listening to the podcast on Apple, subscribe there and make sure to rate the podcast as well. That helps us
rate and
to,
review.
show up and get more people to watch. So once again,
absolutely.
thank you so much for being here, and thank you, Erica, for having this courage to share your light. And we will talk to you guys next week with another episode. Thanks.
Good night.
See ya.
Bye.